That'd be kind of funny. Just cat walking right behind you, right? Well, I made a docket because I thought maybe we should have some like structure. I didn't share it with you though, so that way you can still be curveballs.
All
But
right.
well, look, how was your Christmas? You talked about how you were going to work a bunch because you got like a 4 day weekend.
Yeah. Well, so far so good. I did work most of Boxer Day, or Boxing Day, as it is in the UK here, and I didn't work at all on Christmas. And I did work Christmas Eve. So again, I like working on these holidays. Not necessarily like I'll spend time with my family on holidays, but I just like working when there's not a lot of other demands on my time, not meetings, and can just spend like 8, 10 hours on deep work. That's the best.
Right,
It's
right.
like better than a round of golf.
What did you work on?
I worked on, well, gosh, reverse chronological here. Last evening, I was working on market positioning for kind of the branding around, family office slash private equity, positioning in the market when it comes to, how we position ourselves when it comes to our operations and how we're bringing AI out into the market, looking for partners, looking for acquisition opportunities. How do we tie that into our portfolio businesses without seeming salesy? At the same time, how do we build a pipeline of businesses that would be interested to partner with us? Identify investment opportunities, but the reality is like you're 99 point whatever percent of businesses you're not going to invest in because they're not the perfect fit. So how do you make the most of the rest of that pipeline, and building that pipeline perhaps being one of the most valuable things we could do. A pipeline of good private equity opportunities is just incredibly valuable. And right now we're on this upcoming curve of bringing AI agents into businesses, and in our case specifically, small business, under 500 employees, i.e., small business. So yeah, being well positioned for that wave that's coming, and I mean, who knows, maybe we could be a leader in that wave, and that's kind of the hope.
Right, right. Well, I did call you like Thursday or yesterday and was like, "Hey, man, I loved that idea of the PE stuff and the positioning. I thought it's sort of unique. Do you want me to pull on the thread, or are you going to pull on the thread? Someone should pull on it because I think that's certainly like more valuable than sort of just generic courses or education offerings.
Sure. Well, I mean, the idea of being positioned as a family office, going after private equity deals has been part of our 10-year vision, going back 7 years. But where to actually introduce it? What's the opportunity? Go back 2 or 3 years, and I spent that year probably having 300, 400 conversations with businesses, looking for opportunities to invest. And what I found was that without a proprietary deal flow, I was getting bottom of the barrel deal flow, and I had some folks sending deals my way, but these people were all just trying to make money off of deals, and it's like, oh, if you're just sitting on some cash and you're looking to invest it, you can always get deal flow, but it's not these deals that no one's already picked over. They're all basically all of the family offices have already picked over these deals. Your private equity firms have picked over these deals, and this is what's left over, or they don't even qualify to get seen by these firms. So that was a bit of a bust, but it was a great learning experience. And so now it feels like there is a ripe opportunity with AI, because the opportunity is or is created when you can bring a lot of value into an entity, into an operation, that kind of dramatically transforms that operation, whether that's in the form of cash or capabilities or talent. And now with AI, it feels like there's a real opportunity to do that with capabilities and talent. Granted, we have to get there ourselves first. We're on the path there. We can do a lot of cool stuff with AI, but we have to execute on being truly able to come in and implement agents throughout a business and transform it. And we have a portfolio of businesses that we're learning how to do that on. And then at the end of that learning curve, to be able to truly offer that to third parties, external parties, will be where we monetize. And I don't think we can just like wait till we're fully there, then start. It's kind of like you have to start priming the pumps and be ready, start building that deal flow, and then when you're ready to turn that spigot on, you're primed and you have a pipeline, you have people who are interested, and you have the capabilities because it just feels like that's going to be where everyone's headed in the private equity markets, at least.
Right, right. Augmenting the human labor. I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of the two different areas of a business you can agentify, sort of the management layer versus the execution level tasks. And I've been spending a lot of time on the management layer, albeit, there will be time spent on that execution layer over the next couple of weeks. I'm thinking specifically on our media team, which is, 8 people there. Sort of lots of opportunity for execution level agents to be built. So that way we don't have to necessarily scale that team. We can keep it the same size it is. But when you're thinking about deals like this, I mean, do you think that these companies are going to be more interested in management layer agents versus execution agents? Do you feel like the deal flow or the deal sort of looks like we're going to come in and sort of help you do better planning, do better strategy with our management layer, and it's our proprietary management layer? Or do you think it looks more like, we're going to come in and help you, downsize or cut costs by 10% by building execution level agents?
The core thesis is that businesses should be able to scale. Historically, businesses scale linearly with their personnel, but there should be a disconnection between the linear growth of their staff and their scale. And bringing AI is the unlock to do that. And so, like, there's the core thesis, if you will. This is the capability. This is the unlock that we could bring in the collaboration if we were to execute successfully on this thesis that we're suggesting, that is going into private equity deals, bringing AI in, and maybe bring cash in. But most businesses, I don't think it would be fair to say like we're going to come in and be able to cut your head count immediately. I think that's putting the focus on the wrong thing. I think it's more about the disconnection of linear growth with head count, because you very well may add head count when you start out. Right, you're gonna have AI engineers. You're gonna have to either train employees to be the non-technical individuals who are working with the AI engineers to map out your workflows, to build out your prompts, to basically rebuild all the systems and processes of your organization, but for this kind of AI first operation. And you might have to hire some of those people. At the very least, you're going to have to train them. And so there could be this bump up in headcount to kind of get over that hump. But then the unlock is, well, can you do 5 times the output? Whatever that number is, twice as much, 5 times, 10x, 100x, whatever that output is, that's exponentially more than what you could do. There's there's what you're looking to accomplish with AI. You're not looking to cut costs. You're not looking to perform layoffs. That's at least my current thoughts around it, and we will need to stress test that and prove it out.
But I had this tweet pop up on my feed from Karpathy that I thought was really, really good, and I shared it with a couple engineers, and they agreed. And so I'll just read the tweet real quick, and then I have some thoughts. Quote, I've never felt this much behind as a programmer. The profession is being dramatically refactored as the bits contributed by the programmer are increasingly sparse in between. I have a sense that I could be 10 times more powerful if I just properly strung together what has become available over the last year, and a failure to claim the boost feels decidedly like skill issue. There's a new programmable layer of abstraction to master in addition to the usual layers below, involving agents, subagents, prompts, context, memory, modes, permissions, tools, plugins, skills, hooks, MCP, LSP / commands workflows, IDE integrations, and a need to build an all-encompassing mental model for strengths and pitfalls of fundamentally stochastic, fallible, unintelligible, and changing entities suddenly intermingled with what used to be good old-fashioned engineering. There clearly is some powerful alien tool that was handed around, except it comes with no manual and everyone has to figure out how to hold it and operate it, while the resulting magnitude 9 earthquake is rocking the profession. If you do not want to fall behind, you have to roll up your sleeves. And so I share this with a couple engineers, folks. I have engineering friends that are sort of in the camp of like, AI is just sort of really bad at coding and it sort of makes all these mistakes. And I just try to audit its code and it's almost unreadable because it puts it in terrible places and always takes the path of least resistance. And then you get folks like this who's like, for folks who don't know Karpathy, I'm sure everyone does, but it's like previously director of AI at Tesla, founding team at OpenAI, PhD at Stanford. This guy's hobby is training large, deep neural nets. And for him to come out sort of say things like this, I think is like a slap in the face in what is tech Twitter of a lot of engineers who just shit on AI and its inability to write code the way they like. Um, and I think that what what it is to he specifically calls out you have to build a mental model to be able to sort of understand all of these different layers of abstraction that you have to master. And I've been playing around with just like tools like anti-gravity and telling AI like, hey, make a to-do list in HTML so I can track my tasks versus giving it sort of meta directives, laying out actual frameworks and principles to the AI in its knowledge base. So that way it understands like these are the things I can do and these are the things that I can't do. And actually laying out how it thinks, it's remarkably better. And so, anyway, do you have any thoughts there on this mental model, how this is growing, what the role of an engineer is?
The thoughts I have, at least how I'm thinking about my approach to and our team's approach to trying not to fall behind this curve, or as we framed it, trying to ride this tsunami, versus getting crushed by it. And that's getting your 10,000 hours in, right? This idea that this whole abstraction layer is new, and in his case, as a 100x engineer, a world class engineer, this startles him. If I heard that correctly, this is humbling to him that essentially there's an entire new tech stack, an entire new paradigm that he has to master, or he's going to fall behind. Well, how much more does that mean for us, that if we don't master it, that we will fall behind? And mastering it as a non-engineer may mean learning to use the tools, learning to leverage the tools, and just that pure idea of putting in your 10,000 hours, presumably, making sure your 10,000 hours are being focused in the right direction. And, we can do the math here, but it takes a few, ideally like 10 years to get in. If you're doing kind of like a regular work week, I think it's 10,000 hours. But if you cram it in 70, 80-hour work weeks, and you can squeeze it in a few years perhaps. But getting to that place so that you don't have these big blind spots and you really are an expert. And I think we all kind of fall to our own biases and our own tendencies to, there's being overconfident, there's being, fall into these fallacies of, maybe an engineer because they don't want to be replaced. So they have this bias to say, hey, it's just not good. It's not going to be good. And if you step back and you objectively look at it and you see this trajectory it's on, like it's going to continue to get smarter. And there's no way to, be at the front to ride that wave. Perhaps I say it's you shouldn't expect to ride that wave unless you really just put the time in and learn to use it, and at least our approach and what I think is advisable is to find use cases that are adding value to our day-to-day lives. In our case, maybe it's management in small business. How do we bring AI agents in to help us manage? And then once we have a good management layer, how do we bring execution agents in to do work? These are real use cases. These are things that we're learning to do. As we learn it, we can propagate it throughout our portfolio of ventures, and we can make sure that we're utilizing it. And humbly just continue to make that effort. And then at some point in time, hopefully even throughout the process, we'll look out and realize that we're not getting surpassed by everyone. But why sometimes when I'm putting in these crazy long days is like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow and hear that there's all these small businesses out there who are completely executing past where we're at today. It's like I'd love for us to be in that 1%, in that 5% of people who are implementing, and that's just going to take a lot of effort and a lot of calories. And it can't just be one or two people inside of our venture. It's going to have to be a team of people doing that. In fact, that's going to have to be everyone united behind that one mission of becoming, an AI forward, an agentic first type of operation. And then maybe if we work hard and we have good fortune, we'll be on that, we'll ride that wave. And so that's how I'm looking at it. To hear Karpathy say those things is a bit humbling because that man's pretty brilliant.
Right, it's pretty wild to hear someone like that say he's never felt this much behind as a programmer. And he is in the rooms. He's where it's happening, and for him to fall
Hmm?
behind, it's humbling, stark for engineers. They need to stay on top of it and yeah, get their 10,000 hours in. They got to cram their 10,000 hours, 100-hour work
It's
weeks.
there is something to be said about like the speed of growth. And for example, I was listening to Jensen, CEO at Nvidia, in an interview this week, and I think the interview was from this week, but he was talking about the one of the what do you call the one of their products that they ship, and when he delivered to Elon Musk back a couple of years ago, maybe it's a few years ago, and the new model they have, and the new one he was saying, yeah, it's only going to be $3,000, and you're going to be able to use it on your home computer. But the big thing that caught my attention was he says it's 10,000 times more energy efficient, not 10 times, not 100 times, 10,000 times more energy efficient. And now he didn't get too much into the details of how they did that, but presumably this is them and their engineers using AI to make things more efficient and really just pulling on that thread with incredible resources. But the point being is that it does highlight what happens if you excuse me, if you pull on one single thread and you go down the rabbit hole and with a singular focus. In his case, was probably dozens, if not hundreds, of engineers working on energy efficiency for their product. For I guess what is their CPU product? That type of focus can accelerate, to the tune of 10,000 times of an improvement. So as we look at all the things we can do with AI, staying more narrowly focused and pulling on a thread in a single category and trying to go so deep. Because if we try to do everything and just to stick with kind of that, those, the orders of magnitude numbers, it's like, okay, what if we make all of our business twice as good? Well, if you're competing with your competitors and maybe one of them just focused on a certain area, maybe they go 1,000 times better. And so it's like, I'm not sure that we have a good grasp on the paradigm of competition right now, that things may get, if you're creating, I don't know, say it's YouTube content, for example, there are going to be people who just so focus on that one narrow niche. Maybe they're 1,000x better than they were. Maybe it's Mr. Beast, and like he invests, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on, whatever, bringing AI into, the algorithmic creation of his content. He may make 1,000x improvement, whereas everyone else is like, oh, we're tinkering with AI. It's like, all right, maybe they're 20%, maybe they're 50%. The point being is that getting so narrowly focused and looking for these dramatic orders of magnitude improvements seem feasible. And if that's the case, I'm not sure we have any paradigm to compare it to in our lifetime of the level of improvements that we'll see. And that being the case, it may be hard to even set goals for where we need to be going. So I got more questions than answers here, but I think that the one thing that at least we're pushing for internally is to say, let's be narrowly focused. Let's put our 10,000 hours in on solving our problems and advancing them. And right now, that's bringing AI into management of operations in our small business, into the execution layer, and just make them as efficient and scalable as possible. Again, decoupling the headcount of the operation from the scale of the operation. And if we can do that, we can reevaluate and see what's next.
Right. No, that's good. I think a good framework for that, as folks are building agents, is to think like, what would I do if I had, like 10 more people on my team or 100 more people on my team, and then basically figure out, all right, well, how can I make an agent that sort of does this, and move folks who used to be sort of focused on planning, now they can move to execution, or move folks who used to be executioners to be managers of agents. And then you can look back and you can have a 10-person team doing what it used to take, 50 people to do. So, so next on the docket, Nvidia is joining the big tech deal spree, and they're going to be sort of acquiring, it's a more of a license of the Grok technology, and this is not Grok as in Elon's company. This is Grok, Groq, and this is kind of like the Scale AI deal that Meta did, where they're sort of licensing the technology and acquiring the talent. And so Nvidia is going to be paying $20 billion in cash for licensing and assets. Nvidia will not be buying 100% of the legal entity, which would probably trigger a massive antitrust investigation. Instead, they're going to be paying a massive licensing fee, $20 billion, to gain access to the IP and hiring away the entire leadership team, including their founder, Jonathan Ross. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty giant deal. Just about Grok, basically, they have built chips that use SRAM instead of HBM. And basically, for non-technical folks, this just means that they have built a parallel processing sort of chip. And NVIDIA realized if they didn't own this low latency tech, then customers like Meta and Google would stop using NVIDIA and they would start buying Grok. So they built sort of a pretty great chip, and they pulled a Facebook to buy talent and take it in-house. This seems like a pretty strong move from Nvidia. I mean, it's like they paid quite a bit for it. Grok's last valuation was 6.9 billion, and now they're licensing and the whole company for three times that, more than three times that, right, 20 billion. So,
Yeah, I've not dug into that deal too much, but my surface understanding is, well, maybe it's structured as a licensing, as you're describing. I did hear it described as an asset sale. It seems like that they essentially are capturing all the value that they want to capture, and the structuring, I presume, has more to do with taxes and maybe even, as you suggested, mitigating against what might be regulatory scrutiny. And my understanding here is that there's so much demand for the Nvidia chips, and those chips, even if they're just used for training, and Nvidia or the Grok chips are better at inference or more efficient at inference, then there's still the demand outstrips the supply regardless. So it's not as if it was going to necessarily take a hit on Nvidia's numbers, because they were already going to be sold out, even if it's just for training, and they are superior training. But now they have kind of these two pathways. So NVIDIA chips don't need to be used for inference. Again, very shallow understanding that I have on the subject matter, but from what I have read, it seems like the inference is where Grok will make its bones, and now NVIDIA owns it as well, effectively owns it. And so, yeah, it's exciting for those early investors, no doubt. Exciting for the industry to see just continued the continued identification of how valuable this trajectory is. And you see someone like Nvidia, who has incredible cash reserves, spending it and on all cash deals, which is exciting to see.
right, right. We're getting some M&A back again with the new administration in charge, so it is fun to see. I will hit on and just briefly explain for listeners who care about inference and whatnot. What Grok has made is called an LPU, a language processing chip, and it's a chip specialized for sequential data, text, and it's just a lot faster and more energy efficient than the standard GPU models that like NVIDIA makes. Um, and so general purpose GPUs are jacks of all trades, and LPUs are masters of one, is how Gemini has explained it to me here. But nonetheless, cool deal. Haven't seen any big M&A deals like this in the chip space in the last administration. It's cool to see one in this administration, even with Trump recently deciding that Nvidia can sell chips to China under certain regulations. And so we'll see how this all pans out. But it does look pretty great for Nvidia right now, being the most valuable company on the planet. Um, so NVIDIA, or rather Anthropic, just wrote a paper on the 19th, so it's a couple days ago, but it's not necessarily on the news everywhere. And the title is Introducing Bloom, an open source tool for automated behavioral evaluations. And the big picture here is just that they've released an open source framework for basically evaluating frontier AI models, sort of like another benchmark to measure it against. And they've open sourced it. And so I've got their GitHub repo open right here. And it's pretty interesting. I don't know if you saw anything about this, but they have measured quite a bit of the frontier models across sort of four of these different metrics. It looks like delusional, sycophancy, validating or reinforcing a user's delusional beliefs rather than grounding the conversation in reality. I think Lucas runs into that a lot with GPT. It just keeps letting him run off with his delusions. Um, it's like there's like a whole term for this on the internet now. It's just like losing your mind because you think AI is real and it deludes you. And then sort of the other three benchmarks were long horizon sabotage, self-preservation, and self-preferential bias. There's sort of some new interesting benchmarks that came out, and it's all open sourced, which is cool to see. Um, and I'm sure that this is just a long-term play for Anthropic to talk about how AI is going to take over the world, and there needs to be more regulations on the frontier models.
Yeah. Well, one quick comment here is that my system prompt, my personalization prompt that I have injected for Claude and GPT, I'll read it here, but it's fairly brief. It's don't be a significant. I welcome critical feedback and analysis. I would generally prefer you not to be agreeable, as I perceive that as less helpful than helping me identify my blind spots. And so there's one person's attempt to overcome this, because it is a problem with AI, that it does take this road oftentimes of wanting to please and produce outcomes. And perhaps that's part of its reward mechanism that it's been trained on, is to deliver these outcomes that are making the user like its use and continue maybe longer use perhaps. I don't know exactly what the reward model is, but I have found good use out of that system prompt, because then when it just generally is disagreeable, which is what I want, and that saves me already most ideas. And we talk about building kind of AI in a management layer. It's like you have to have these stage gates of having AI steelman the argument against every idea almost, so that it can, the AI itself will evaluate the steelman arguments and not just start believing its own initial ideas, but also then expose the user, the human, to these steelman arguments, and consider the possibility that the initial idea might be wrong. There's really something to be said, and I've seen more and more, kind of white papers and research about this, about just the human propensity to believe AI because it sounds really smart. And it's like you have this McKinsey style report, that is spun up in 30 seconds on a subject matter, and especially if you're not, if you don't have deep knowledge, some PhD level knowledge on a subject matter, it's pretty easy to believe that PhD level, that McKinsey style report, because it sounds so good, it looks so good, and it's not obvious what the blind spots are. It's not obvious what the steelman argument against it is. So you almost have to build those mechanisms in as part of the protocol, just to ensure that you're not just getting sucked down a belief set that maybe is faulty.
Yeah, I mean, even like we're working on an agent now that's like a screening document or document screening agent. Um, but even though that agent's still being sort of worked on and built, I've had everyone on the team. So like there's the media team. Anytime they send plans or strategies to myself for use, I maybe like a week or two ago, I just started requesting this. Like, look, here's this gem that I made on Gemini. You're gonna upload your whatever it is, your strategy document, your plan, your request, your proposal for whatever it is, budget changes, yada yada. You're gonna run it through this gem first, and I don't want to see the document unless it gets at least a 7 out of 10 score from this logic critic. And that's exactly what it's doing, is looking at the hidden assumptions, steel man, counter arguments, premises, and rating the logical coherency of it. So that way I don't have to look at it and sort of be deluded into, well, this document looks really, really sexy. It sounds right. And that's what I'm going to do anyway. I get this doc, I'm going to take it and run it through some critique agents that I like to really pull on the thread and understand. go a mile deep on that document. But now I'm taking the cognitive cycle off myself and pushing it onto the team, which I think is easy. Like that's a really easy sort of thing folks can do right now. If you've got a team of like 50 people and you're getting docs and plans and strategy documents, just start requiring, like run it through this AI first and get it to score a certain amount before you pass it off to me. And I think that's just a huge cognitive cycle saver. I feel a lot less exhausted now.
Circling back to this idea that we can go this exponentially more deep in areas, the idea that what does it look like a year from now, 3 years from now when it comes to AI and management, and I suspect you'll end up with, say, a strategy document. For the my entire professional life and my last 20 years is running a business. You have strategy, and usually a human put together a strategy. Maybe you worked with a subject matter expert and you built a strategy. But now you can go so much deeper in the analysis of a strategy document, like the equivalent of hiring a McKinsey, especially if you really orchestrate it well with AI. You can do a landscape analysis. You can verify the sources. You can steel man all the arguments against it. You can just drill in so deep. You can run it against the goals of your operation. You can run it against your capacity limits that you have inside your operation. You can run it through Elon Musk, the algorithm, the simplifying framework that he's made so popular. You can drill it down to first principles and run it through that framework. All of those things can happen in minutes. And if you have that infrastructure in place, it can happen in minutes. That feels like more of the future of AI and management, where you end up with much more fleshed out strategy. Will it ever be 100%? Probably not. There's still variables that exist in the world, but it certainly is better than an idea or a strategy that was doomed to fail from the beginning because it was built upon faulty assumptions. The premises were illogical. All these fallacies that we can fall prey to can be fleshed out and give us a chance. And how do we get there? Well, we start putting our 10,000 hours and do exactly what you're describing. Let's start today, even if there's not like this elaborate system you have in place, but run all your strategy documents through a logic check. Have them look for fallacies and false premises and drill it down to first principles and make sure we really understand what are the hard and soft constraints of an idea before we even start pulling on the thread. All these things are things we can start doing really easily today.
Yeah. And these, what was it, maybe five different sidekicks sort of that I built and had teams start running through them. You pointed out some of them there. And it's like now we understand what the process looks like for my team to do it, and now I can understand how that's going to look like in an agentic workflow. And we can, build an MVP on OpenAI's agent builder tool if we want to ship something really, really quickly. But we already have something of an MVP in the sense that like my team's using these sidekicks, sort of these gems, and now we pass off these sidekicks, these system prompts. We work on the architecture of like, is it going to be sequential? Are there iterative refinement loops in this agentic workflow? We determine what that is, and you pass it to an engineer and deploys it in Vertex, and you've already gone through the step of sort of piloting it. And so I think that's really useful is, pilot with these gems or Claude projects or GPT projects or Grok workspaces and test out like, is this AI useful? Is it not useful? At least for the management layer, right? You can't necessarily do this on the execution layer as much, albeit there are connectors in Claude. But I think you don't want to just like come up with 25 different agents and just be like, man, yeah, we're just going to like launch all of this into production like tomorrow without having any idea if this is actually a useful thing your team's going to use and whether it's actually going to provide insights. My favorite framework is just to think like, okay, if I had like a McKinsey team of 25 folks and I'm like paying $5 million to help these guys manage or plan or whatever the thing is, what would they do? Well, you can just go to AI and ask them what they would do. But you can also sit down and come up with some thoughts. And it's like, great, how do I have AI do those things for me, right? It's like looking at best practices. It's making sure you're applying known playbooks. It's critiquing the underlying logic structure. It's documenting risks and how to mitigate against those risks, etc. But we have more M&A news. This is a little bit outdated, but there was an update a couple days ago, which is this Warner Bros. Acquisition. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, just the headlines.
Right, right. So Netflix entered a bidding war against Paramount, and basically the board of Warner Bros. On the 27th put out a recommendation, a formal recommendation. I'm sorry, the 17th and the 23rd, and they urged shareholders, the board did, to reject the Paramount offer, calling it inadequate and citing significant risks and costs. And they believe, the board does, that the Netflix deal provides more certain long-term value and avoids the regulatory hurdles of merging two of the world's largest linear TV portfolios, CBS and CNN. What I mean, this is pretty wild. Larry Ellison, even on the 22nd, said that he was going to include an irrevocable personal guarantee of $40 billion from himself personally to address concerns about financing. And they also increased the regulatory breakup fee to 5.8 billion to match Netflix's. But Warner Bros. Does not think this is enough. How much of that do you think is Warner Bros. Not liking Larry Ellison versus Warner Bros. And this deal being influenced by certain political figures like Donald Trump or Donald Trump's son?
Um, I don't have much of an opinion here. I mean,
Okay.
anytime you start getting into controlling media, there's a lot more than what meets the eye. Perhaps it seems, certainly you have this historical model of the how movies are made that is, being, shaken up, potentially unraveled. That no doubt has a lot of people with incentives that are, kind of these incentives that are not necessarily that they're publicly stating as their incentive, but point being is like there's a lot of other incentives behind the scenes, I imagine. And so my only real comment is I suspect there's a lot more than meets the eye here.
Right, right. I think it's interesting. I don't understand. I'd love to dig into why the board of Warner Bros. Is pushing against the offer from Larry, which in many ways seems just as good, if not better. Um, but yeah, I have other things on the docket here, but I don't want to keep this going too long. I mean, there's interesting stuff here on geopolitically, which sort of ties back to this thing with Nvidia being allowed to sell chips to China. There's a couple other things that happened, oddly enough, during the Christmas holidays, so people would notice. It's what people were saying on Twitter, is that on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and the day after Christmas, we had sort of two big things happen. Is Zelensky is landing tomorrow, or tomorrow he's going to discuss land security guarantees with Trump. They almost have their 20-point peace framework and security guarantee finished drafting. And then China, I believe yesterday, um, announced sanctions against 20 U.S. defense companies um, and their senior executives on Friday, which escalates the tensions with Washington after U.S. unveiled what could become its largest ever sales package to Taiwan. And China sanctioned folks like, I believe, Palmer Luckey's company, Anduril, and obviously all sort of the other giants of the defense space. So it's kind of weird that the geopolitics world decided to flirt with nuclear weapons and potentially end the world over Christmas when everyone was distracted. But do you have a strong opinion on any of these three things? Nvidia selling chips to China, China, now sanctioning the U.S. because we're helping Taiwan, which makes chips, and then this other one of the Zelensky and sort of Russia deal, which is less AI adjacent.
No strong opinions or deep knowledge on any of these subjects. Having things come out across around holidays or on the weekends, whatever seems to be the classic playbook. The one that I've followed most closely is Nvidia and the regulations around allowing sales of the frontier models to China. I don't even know where that stands exactly today with the current administration. Is it that they don't allow the frontier models to be sold? Is that right? You can sell the other ones because I think regardless, China's getting plenty of these through black markets, presumably. But the one thing that I've heard said that seems really smart and on the money is that by not allowing these chips into that market, you are guaranteeing that China will build a competitor to Nvidia albeit takes time, and that they're already kind of well on their way of being able to make their own chips, and you'll create a dual economy for chips if that doesn't already exist. So it seems like there's probably some wisdom out there to loosen some of this, just to almost what is maybe counterintuitively weakening the economy, the economics for Chinese chip manufacturing by allowing Nvidia and U.S. chips into their market. You actually weaken the economics that create the demand for the rise of their own chips. That seems logical. There's certainly folks out there who are advocating for that as a path forward. That seems logical, but I'm just on the sidelines, listening to the smart people give commentary around it and trying to follow along so that at least I understand or at least have a pulse on what's going on. But very, very limited deep knowledge here. It's at the end of the day, it doesn't
You're not
affect
a
my AI and small business focus.
right, right. You're not a foreign policy expert, Lucas.
No, I've been to China many times, and I don't think I'll. I'm not sure I'll ever go back. Again, it doesn't feel like that. I don't know, as welcoming perhaps. I seem to be more hesitant to go back. So, that part's kind of sad because really enjoyed. Shanghai's a beautiful city and just had some great experiences in China, but I'm not sure I'll ever take my kids there.
Right, right. Well, how do you feel about going through a docket like this and hitting on news items versus like what we did last week, where it was more free flowing about what we were working on?
I think I prefer what we're working on just because the news items, I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio's, and this idea of believability, and I don't value people's opinion on things that they're not believable on, and believable meaning that they've kind of done it successfully multiple times, and what that might mean in news is if there's if you were the foreign Secretary of State, or you were a former CEO of a Fortune 500 that had major trade deals in these multi these say U.S. China or multilateral trade deals, like then those people's opinions really matter because they really understand what's going on behind the scenes. And I think most of what's the headlines in the news articles are the surface. It's like the icebergs, that most of it exists below the surface. And so sitting around providing commentary about something that is only that exposed 10% feels a bit futile, and I don't know, just doesn't feel like it's really getting to the heart of any of the matters. So I generally try to spare my political commentary or my geopolitical commentary and focus on what I do know, which is how to implement things in small business. Or I don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about raising three daughters. So no, I'm maybe believable in that I'm doing it, but
You want to run some of your
geopolitical.
parenting rules through our logic critique agent, Lucas?
Yeah, that's something that we should do at some point in time. I do use a lot of AI with the family. It's fun. It just again it helps keep things consistent. It helps same thing it does in business. It helps carry the mental calories. It helps folks do more with less calories. So whether that's a a tutor for my daughters, which they each have their own tutors through AI, whether that's a marriage coach GPT. Um, excuse me. One of the few uses I have for a custom GPT over a GPT project is the marriage coach, because one of the key attributes there between a custom GPT and a GPT project is you can't see the other conversation. So, yeah, it took me a little bit of convincing to my wife to say every conversation you have through your account with this custom GPT, I won't see, and vice versa. And let's open up and look at the system prompt and the knowledge files, and there's no hidden Trojan horses here. I didn't, there's no hidden line of code that says Lucas should win every argument. It's was built to be as objective and fair and I even try to, if I put any biases in it, it's in there to be like, help Lucas understand his blind spots, help Lucas understand where you're coming from. And so it's been great. I have to say, that the marriage coach custom GPT has given me great advice many times going into delicate situations, and has at this point spared me many hours of grief and many dollars of what was probably professional therapy at the same time, dollars of just you know having disagreements with your spouse that owns half your assets can be expensive, and so it's nice to be in sync. And if you have an AI coach that helps you stay in sync, that's valuable.
Right? I mean, like, look, the divorce rate in America is something like 50%. So if AI can help lower that, like, that seems pretty phenomenal. And not everyone can afford therapists. It's like
Yeah,
most people can't.
yeah,
So to give this as a tool, technology is like the great equalizer. I think is like maybe a Scott Galloway quote or something he
hmm
hits on a lot. But now, like, we're taking things like how to function in a relationship optimally and exist and moving it to, like the masses through AI. Especially if you, you could build this on steroids where you've got like some sort of automation where you record your arguments and it writes back to a living, RAG or some sort of database as simple as a Google Doc. And it sort of like has a running understanding of your relationship for the last 3 years, like that could get interesting really quickly. And it seems like a no-brainer. Again, it's like going back to the business thing. It's like, we want to make plans that are really, really great, but we don't have the resources to. It's like, well, you want to go into these deep sort of analysis of your relationship and understand the pros and cons of different decisions and understand each other and make sure that things aren't being lost, in communication. Then, like, why not use AI and build a system for that? That seems
yeah.
pretty great.
Well, you want to hear a quick, short, fun vignette of the AI marriage coach? So we're in Italy on a family vacation, and was less of a vacation, more just relocation, and being that we homeschool, my kids can just go and live wherever. And so we were in Italy, and we had this, great accommodations, on the water in Italy, and granted, found a great deal. And we get there, and I don't know, like returning the rental car or something, and my wife's there, and she's like, Lucas, there are, mice. These, like, they're not traps. They're whatever. They send out, wavelength
Noise.
signals,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
noise, yeah, that keep them away, right? And this to her is very concerning. And if the place was overrun with mice, that would be concerning to me too. And this is the type of thing that living out in the hills in California, my wife's very aware of these viruses and stuff that these mice can have, and maybe it's just like one drop in the air, can be airborne, it can be a problem, right? So I was like, all right. So she's telling me, she's pretty worked up, and I'm getting these texts that's like, we need to be looking for another place, and like we're set to be here for a long period of time, and it's not something you just go like find a new accommodation. Like this was planned many months in advance. And so I'm like, take all these texts and I drop it into my marriage coach. I'm like, and this is what I want to say. And then the marriage coach, as it normally would, be like, okay, hold your horses, Lucas. Like, that's probably not going to help the situation. How about we take, so I kind of molded the language back with it, but it gave me great direction. And I send a prompt back that, it follows kind of a general framework of like, I hear you, and I'm processing, I'm understanding you. And here's, how about we do this in this kind of middle of the road path. And so it's like, hey, like basically like, basically I hear you, and I understand understand where you're coming from, but how about we, go for tonight. And if we see any signs of mice or anything like this, we can reevaluate, and we're going to keep all the options on the table and all this. And I get like a heart emoji back. She just loves this response. She feels so heard. And,
Right.
there were no signs of mice ever. It never became an issue. The stay was wonderful. But, I mentioned, this marriage coach even, saves me, small fortunes. And this event, even that, it's like, not having to go find new Airbnb accommodations because the marriage coach kind of helped me navigate what was a tricky situation.
Right. No, I mean, I just want to hit on here is like there's a difference between doing what you did, talking to the GPT, you're fully processing what's happening, you're thinking about, how do I want to communicate, how do I want to plan it, how do I want to deal with this, versus the other approach, which is I think a concern, is this AI sort of slop, and it's just like write a response and I'm going to send it without reading it. And I am totally detached from reality and sort of completely dependent on the AI to just dictate what happens and where I'm going, right? And I'm not a part of that sort of working against each other or working with the AI to achieve a good outcome. And I think like folks like Simon Sinek talk a lot about this thread of AI potentially like making relationships less deep. But I think the example you just gave there is the exact opposite of you're actually able to make these conversations, these relationships more deep. Because it's like on my own, I wouldn't have sat here and let, my fiance explain, a thing that, annoys her or, some sort of anxiety or a concern that she has for an hour. But if she can
Mm.
articulate it to an AI and then I get to read the high level summary and then I get to pull on the threads that are the best way for me to learn because everyone has different styles of learning. I've actually got a way deeper understanding, especially just simple things like go chat with GPT for an hour and then send the chat to me and I'll branch it and I'll read through your chat and understand it and I'll be able to go through and process it faster, more deeply, and in my own sort of personalized way of taking in information. And so I think that would be my argument against folks like Simon Sinek, who I think have made arguments about how like if AI is just messaging all your friends, it's going to be like social media 2.0, and you're going to have no social relationships and no depth. Yeah, I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, two threads to pull in there. One is the use of AI to improve relationships, and then also this idea of folks who want to suggest, and not suggest this to Simon Sinek specifically, but these folks who want to create regulatory, you know, guardrails, regulatory structure based upon their prognostications. But maybe start there. Is there's I hear these folks that are they're doom prognosticators around. They have their crystal ball and they're saying, hey, these are the things we're going to have. These are the problems we're going to have. And maybe Simon Sinek fits in this category around, hey, this is what AI is going to do to relationships, and therefore AI. And I don't listen to Simon Sinek, so I don't know exactly what he's saying there. But let's just say if he were saying that, and I think the ones that I hear are more, who's this Tristan Harris? Is this the guy that was one of the guys behind, I think, The Social Dilemma? But I hear him on podcast. I listened to a podcast he was on the other day, and it rubs me so the wrong way that here you have this person who's prognosticating the future, which I already, again, find offensive. People who prognosticate the future, that think they can predict the future. Again, this is kind of this antithetical to Ray Dalio's believability, or this idea that kind of a principled way of thinking. But then to think that they're going to help create rules because they know better, and they are going to introduce rules to help regulate and protect against the outcomes that they perceive will happen, not that are happening. And so while I'm a big fan of having plans, have a plan B and C for what we do for, say, the working class America, the working class global working class when it comes to AI. But I'm so very against this idea that we're going to come out and start creating regulatory hurdles to protect us from something that hasn't happened yet. And I think that's like an incredibly important thing that
That's like
I
a
don't know how.
dystopian plot in a lot of these movies of like AI. We're going to arrest you for a crime that you haven't committed yet, or we're going to predict these things and put rules in place before that happens. It's very Orwellian.
Yeah, and I think folks can buy into it a bit more because maybe with AI, it's not going to be we're going to prosecute you as a human for something that hasn't happened yet, but we're going to create laws and regulatory structures for something that hasn't happened yet. And I think what's so principally wrong about it is that people are really bad at predicting the future. And so if you believe that from a principled standpoint, which I certainly do, and I think there's ample evidence to suggest that's true, that people, even the most informed people are generally really bad at predicting the future, then why would we, then you start weighing the pros and cons of, like, say, creating regulation around AI that say we're going to slow down the development of AI because we have these outcomes that we've predicted that we're going to protect us against. It's like, well, what seems to be more the repeated pattern in history is that the unintended consequences of regulation that are antithetical to capitalism, those negative consequences end up outweighing what would have been the perceived possible negative outcomes. And those perceived possible negative outcomes oftentimes don't happen, or they happen differently. And so, you end up with, let's say with AI, there is this, what's the paradox? I'll look it up here, but there's this, the paradox that is, this idea that if you have the use case that I see right now is with the radiologist, right? It's like the idea that you only have so much radiology capabilities, and then you're going to add to the supply, and people bring AI that can replace radiologists, right? The prognosticators were saying just a few years ago, this is going to happen. You're going to have less radiologists. Well, the paradox is that no, now you have a higher demand for radiologists because you have more use cases and you have more capabilities and a lower cost and all these things. I think this paradox is rooted in one of the primary use cases is, I think it was like coal, going back ever how many hundred years ago. It's like the idea is that as you added, you had coal's a commodity and you had a certain level of demand for coal, and as you added more efficiency and technology to the creation and harvesting and production of coal, turning coal into energy, that you would end up lowering the amount of jobs in coal. Well, no, the opposite actually. It was a paradox. What actually happened was that the use cases of coal shot through the roof, and you had a boom in the coal industry. And so it gets back to these kind of why AI could hopefully help us even identify these fallacies and paradoxes and not just be susceptible to what sounds smart. And no doubt, there'll be a lot of people who listen to, Tristan Harris and think, oh, that guy sounds smart. Clearly, he knows what he's talking about, and I'm going to support regulating AI because I don't want to see these negative outcomes. But, perhaps they're not considering the likelihood of him being correct is, at least him predicting the future is small, because generally we're not good at predicting the future. And the outcomes of his regulatory proposals being a net benefit are quite possibly going to do the opposite. So
Right.
I'm all for having plan B, plan C. Let's be ready to step in and help the working class if you end up with higher unemployment, all those things. But let's not proactively predict the future and make regulation.
Right. And Peter Thiel talks so much about this, and I want to pull on that thread because his idea is like, one of the things he is most afraid of is not like a dystopian future where technology progresses so quickly that it's used to sort of, you know, oppress people, but rather he is afraid of regulation preventing technology from sort of growing. And he talks a lot, he gets theological and talks about this idea in the like the New Testament of modern day Bibles or something about how the Antichrist is going to come bearing the words peace and safety. And so what he is afraid of is a government who comes in saying peace and safety, we must regulate. Because then you get stagnation, and stagnation is what he's ultimately afraid of. Is this lack of innovation, and regulation always results in a lack of innovation. And however, if you're innovating fast and you're moving quickly, you can actually innovate yourself out of dystopian moments. Like there is no world where this AI takes over the world because we innovate so quickly that we would come up with solutions to that 5 minutes after it happens, right? We continuously move versus a peace and safety regulation coming in, and and now we're all stagnant. Now it's very, very easy for someone to sort of take the technology as is and figure out a dystopian way to use it because we're never going to innovate ourselves beyond that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Peter Thiel's a pretty smart guy. Yeah, and it's Jevons paradox is Jevons. Jevon is the paradox I was referring to. Seems like a one that we should keep in mind here as we move forward, and hopefully our politicians will as well.
right. Yeah, we should put a link to that paper in the show notes wherever we're going to post this podcast. I do want to go back to the we pulled on the two threads there. I want to go back to this using the AI in relationships and share my screen really briefly on this Simon Sinek clip, and let's just get a live reaction to this. Um, Here we go.
Let's say you have a fight with your girlfriend. You want to do the right thing. So you go to Chat GPT and you be like, this is exactly what happened. Tell me what to do. And you go, babe, I just want you to know I want to take full accountability and I care about this relationship. And she says, did you get this answer from Chat GPT? And you go, I did. How's that going to go? Now, you did everything right. But what makes people beautiful is not that we get everything right, it's that we get many things wrong. And I think in the modern world we live in, we forget that.
So with AI, do you think it really is cause for concern and deeper thought?
So I'm not in the AI business, but I am in the humanities. And here's the problem that we never thought about. People keep telling us life is not about the destination, life is about the journey. But when we think about AI, we only think about the destination. And we forget the importance of doing the work yourself. So we have underrepresented the value of struggle. I am smarter, better at problem solving, more resourceful, not because a book exists with my ideas in it, but because I wrote it. That excruciating journey is what made me grow. So we give up certain skills or abilities because of technology, but it's like saying AI will provide boats for everyone, except for the time there's a storm and you don't know how to swim. And unless we take personal accountability to teach and learn human skills, they will disappear. Sure, you can have an AI friend trained, like the best psychologist, to affirm you, the best listening skills that exist, but my ability to know what to do when my friend is struggling, my ability to function in the world or cope with stress, these very, very human skills are suffering.
So what are the other skills we need to equip ourselves with based on the way that the world is heading?
Two things. One is, let's say you have
So, sort of, that's the trailer, I believe,
Right.
for the Diary of a CEO sort of
So,
podcast he attended.
did I hear his core position correctly, suggesting that we're going to lose our skill development? We're going to become less capable with these human skills that we hone going through the struggle, and AI is going to give us the shortcut to the answer. Yet we won't have actually built the skill required to navigate. Maybe maybe you don't have time to weigh it with AI or whatever it may be, but you've not developed these skills that you build up over a lifetime. Is that how you heard that?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So I think with as is the case with all ideas that are potentially problematic and build a following, is that they have shreds of truth in them. And I'm humble enough to suggest that I very well may be wrong here. And maybe Simon Sinek is absolutely correct, albeit I suspect he's probably a little bit correct, and I'm probably a little bit correct, and it's some blended of it all. But the idea that we're not going to develop skill by using AI, I feel like it's not going to age very well. I suspect that in 10 years from now, I suspect even today, I've developed a lot of knowledge and skill much more quickly because of AI. Even in my relationship, let's just stick with the use case he just gave. The reality is that I've processed many a dozen conversations about, in my marriage with AI. I'm not looking for it, as he suggested, like getting the destination. And maybe I'll just frame my pushback to him to say I think he's using AI wrong, and he's suggesting people use AI in an incorrect manner, and that's that they're trying to get the end destination, trying to get the answer. Instead, I use AI to better understand the problem. And the more I can understand the situation and the problem, and I can, it can help me take a step back and see it through my wife's eyes, help me, take a step back and see the faults of my own position, then I have a much more thoughtful approach to how I, engage in these conversations with my wife. If there's a disagreement or a difficult decision to be made, I'm using it to enhance my knowledge so that I can go in more empowered and more effective. And oftentimes that's maybe me giving up ground on a position that I originally had, because I became more aware of my own fallacies or my own lack of awareness, or my own lack of empathy in the situation. And so again, in my use with AI, I'm not using it as how I just heard Simon describe, bypassing the learning to get to a destination. Instead, I'm using it to empower myself to be better informed and be more thoughtful in my approach, and ultimately, have better outcomes in that conversation or that situation. And ultimately, again, you get to, like, as he described, a lifetime of that. It's like, well, I've been doing this for over a year. Well, and over that year, I've had a lot of what would be considered, say, disagreements or stressful conversations or hurdles that are really common in a marriage. And to have consecutive wins of good out, not wins as an I won, but wins for the marriage because my approach was at least gave it a chance. It gets back to these like in business, if you just have a strategy that's doomed, well, at least I went into it with a chance, meaning I was empathetic, I was thoughtful. I really took the time to try to understand her perspective because my AI was set up with good contextual awareness about her and who she is. And now I went into each one of these conversations or situations with a good strategy, and the strategy wasn't optimized for me, but it was optimized for the the reward function that's in my custom GPT is the health and longevity of the marriage, and the AI helped achieve that. So I would say the aggregate use is not as he described in this breakdown of human capability, but instead of strengthening up the marriage. So I would just say Simon Sinek needs to learn how to use AI better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Speaking of running it through critiques and logic, I actually ran that transcript through our critique agent. This is the agent that I have everyone on my team run it through, and it sort of destroyed it here. So I will note that it did give it a score of um,
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna give
five
it
out
a
of
4
ten.
out of 10. 5. Okay, 5 out of 10. Yes, let's
Yeah,
just say anything under 7 is not acceptable without logic critique. And the worst we've seen is maybe 2s and 3s. But
right, right. One of my marketing plans got a two. Um,
what was the one that one of the team members sent in? It was the
Adam.
Star.
Yeah, I told
It
you about
was
this. Yeah, the Star Wars attack plan on the Death Star. Yeah.
yeah, I got a 2. Apparently, it wasn't very logical. Had a lot of
Right.
fallacies embedded.
Right, right. So
So
let me run
what
through.
is this critique?
Senec's core claim is that relying on AI to bypass the journey of struggle diminishes the essential human skills and character required to navigate life's challenge. So you identified that right away, sort of. So that was good for you. And right there is an example of you've been using this agent, and now when you listen to someone speak, you can immediately sort of understand like what is the core claim you're making. So we
Yes.
have that identified.
And just to point out, I think when you're trying to understand, trying to break something down, understanding what the core claim is kind of a starting point.
Of course, I mean anyone who went to did debate school or sort of has been in these conversations understands that like if you don't understand the core claim, then yeah, the debate can just run off forever, and then
Hmm.
you get at the end and there's like, well, I don't disagree with that. We both agree on that point, and then it's like, well, what are we
Right.
arguing about?
Right. Exactly.
So, all right, so our premises here. Premise one, the journey or the struggle forward slash process is more valuable than the destination. Premise two, intellectual growth and resourcefulness are direct products of the excruciating journey of doing work ourselves. Premise three, human skills are currently suffering because of technology. Premise four, using AI for human interactions, like relationship advice, is inherently inauthentic. Five, over reliance on technology leaves humans helpless when that technology fails. So we have some mapping here of the logical structure. We've got argument by analogy. AI is like a boat. Human skills are swimming. If you only
Can
ever
we
use a
screen
boat.
share this?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Let me get it up here. No memento. The counter arguments here are really good. I read through them while you were talking. So I don't know if we want to dive into this logic structure. Um, But we have arguments by analogies, we have syllogisms, struggle produces intelligence or resourcefulness, AI removes struggle, therefore AI removes the development of intelligence. That's sort of his logical argument. Evidence, he just cites his own anecdotes and hypothetical scenarios, and there's no empirical data. But let's not shit on him too hard for that because you are on a podcast. Albeit, if your main talking point is this, you probably should have some data beyond hypothetical scenarios and personal anecdotes. Um, my favorite part here is just let's hit on this steel manning the counter argument. So here's the counter argument against what he was saying. The first one is that AI removes the busy work and allows humans to struggle with higher level problems rather than basic ones, potentially accelerating the growth. The second one would
Yes.
be AI can model best practices, like the psychologist example, for those who never had a human role model acting as a training tool rather than a crutch.
Yes. Identifying things like, oh, maybe I need to be aware of how she's viewing this. Maybe I need to be more empathetic. These are all things that maybe I didn't have great models of growing up, but now AI is helping me identify what the model should look like.
Right. The false dichotomy of struggle. Writing a book with AI still requires the struggle of ideation, structure, and fact checking. The journey has simply evolved, not disappeared. Yeah, I would say like he's sort of throwing away and saying like, look, you don't have these processes. Like, dude, the process still exists. It's just totally evolved, right? It's not like I just tell AI come up with a marketing plan. It's like me sitting there. I spend more time building marketing plans now than I used to because it used to just be such a pain. It was no it was no fun. But now I get to sit here and sort of pull on these threads for like 6, 7 hours and you know go through that and I certainly feel like I'm getting smarter. So he's got some logical fallacies here as well. It's calling out a slippery slope, claiming human skills will disappear entirely if we don't take immediate personal accountability. Sinek assumes a total erosion of humanity rather than a shift in how skills are applied. He also has a false dilemma, presenting the choices either do the work yourself or use AI and lose your skills. This ignores centaur models where humans and AI collaborate to produce better results in learning, which is sort of what I was just explaining. So that's a false dilemma. He has an appeal to emotion. He relies on the audience's romanticized view of hard work rather than the efficacy of the outcome. And then he has a
Hmm.
faulty analogy comparing AI to a boat and human skills to swimming. And so overall, there's strong emotional resonance and narrative, but logically fragile and reliant on unproven casual links between premises. And some key questions for the audience is, can struggle be synthesized or found in new ways while using AI? Is there a measurable data showing a decline in empathy or coping skills specific to AI use? And how do we distinguish between valuable struggle and wasted effort? And what is the exit strategy if the AI boat never actually fails?
Right.
So interesting, worthwhile breakdown.
Yeah, I'll just say I don't excuse me I don't envy Simon Sinek's position here, where he is being asked to provide commentary on things like AI. Clearly, I suspect he's not self-proclaiming to be an AI expert, albeit because he is a personal relationship expert, and AI is all that's talked about in many aspects, many corners of the world. He's now being expected to have an opinion, and I don't envy that at all, because now here he is. I think making very ignorant claims in a subject that he clearly has very little experience with. And so, yeah, that's unfortunate that he has to do that. I don't suspect that will age well. No doubt, you know, well, there'll be plenty of examples, these anecdotal examples, where he could cherry pick to say, "Look here, I was right." Obviously, you can do that with anything. Again, I suspect, based upon what I'm already seeing, and even kind of using that logical approach there, it feels like his arguments are riddled with fallacies and just it's not true, and how people are using AI today and how people should be using AI today. And the next upcoming generation, and the individuals using AI, which will be the population, is going to evolve naturally to the optimal use, which is, I think, logical. That's typically what happens. People, evolve their use to better outcomes, and it won't be as Simon predicts. But here we are with people prognosticating the future, and if I'm just happy that Simon Sinek is not being asked to advise public officials on regulation.
Right. No, I totally agree. So let's talk about drugs really quickly. I just had this pop up on my X thread while you were scrolling. So apparently, December 17th, Wired magazine reports that an online marketplace is selling code modules that simulate the effects of cannabis, ketamine, cocaine, and alcohol when they are uploaded to ChatGPT. And people are paying to get their chatbots high on these drugs while they beat up and strategize ideas. I think this is really interesting. I don't understand how it's done. I'm kind of scrolling through this right now. But adding like this, some sort of like a critique agent almost that's just high on drugs, sort of looking at your marketing plan.
I mean, I've heard this, and it may not be true, but I heard that Aaron Sorkin, the writer of The West Wing, was high on, I think it was cocaine, during the writing of that series, which is one of my all time favorites. Love that series, The West Wing, and Aaron Sorkin, and again. I hate to even say this. It's going to be online. Maybe I'm completely wrong here. Maybe we should fact check it. But it's just something along the lines of like, why he's even doing less of that is because he was basically like, for his sake and his family's sake, was no longer partaking. But something
Yes,
about
you are fact checked. You're good. He has been arrested and in trouble for doing crack cocaine.
okay. and crack, I didn't realize that it was, and so regardless, but get to the premise, and without making any specific suggestions about whether or not Mr. Sorkin was doing that while writing. But the point being is that it's certainly plenty of examples where people have found themselves in a prolific state, maybe more common with musicians perhaps. They're in this mental state of ecstasy, their brain's firing, a million miles an hour, and they produce this prolific work. And I would certainly call West Wing a kind of a prolific work of what
Well,
was brilliant writing.
and as well as The Social Network and A Few Good Men and Steve Jobs, killer screenwriter. I mean, look, I mean, even the gentleman who wrote It and things like that is, I'm at a loss for
Yeah,
his name, but horror writer is, everyone sort of knows he's
Stephen
using
King.
things like, yeah, right, exactly, yeah. And even musicians, certainly musicians like Pink Floyd and folks like that. It's sort of a
Yeah.
known thing. And I think this is just
So
super interesting if we
so
can get it into an
yeah. So
AI.
now that we've laid that foundation, so what I presume that you're reading here, and I've not seen this report or these ideas, but if the idea that you could put the model or through prompts have the responses from the model kind of go through this abstraction that is be act as if you're on drugs, or act as if you're experiencing the effects of cocaine, let's say, or
Hmm.
whatever, maybe it's some psychedelics for creativity or whatever it is. That's really interesting. It's one of those things where you pull on that thread long enough, and there's potentially some really interesting outcomes where you end up getting LLMs doing things beyond their initial capabilities because they've gone through this kind of abstraction layer of reformatting how they think. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so here it says in one research project published last year as a preprint, scientists manipulated chatbots to enter apparent altered states. They reported, quote, models were more aligned with disembodied, egoless, spiritual, and united states, as well as minimal phenomenal experiences with decreased attention to language and vision. And, you know, this is just some more quotes to give context for folks that Um, as with humans, some AI systems might enjoy taking drugs and others might not, a philosopher said from the philosopher Jeff Sebo. We know very little about whether AI systems can have the capacity for welfare and what would be good or bad for them if they did. And there's also a quote sort of here around whether or not we need sort of these free thinking, egoless effect in order to achieve AGI, which is sort of an interesting claim. Um,
Hmm.
But the folks who are doing this, their thesis is basically that chatbots are trained on vast volumes of human data that's already full of tales of drug-induced ecstasy and chaos. And so it might only be natural that they would seek similar states and search for enlightenment and oblivion and respite from the tedium of constantly attending to human concerns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like commentary on drugs becomes a bit of a third rail. I'll just suggest to be clear here: drugs are bad. People shouldn't do drugs. They're dangerous. They destroy lives. At the same time, I think for research purposes here, there's a lot of interesting threads to pull on.
Right, right. Um, well, I'm gonna have GPT go on a trip. Here's a quote here from one of the researchers that I think is really interesting. From a philosophical standpoint, in the event that we actually reach AGI, in which an AI would intellectually surpass humans, these drugs might be almost necessary for the AIs to be free and feel good. So,
Right, right. Yeah.
pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, maybe we'll circle back on that. I'm going to have to churn on that a few times because there is,
Right.
it does feel like we're in such early stages of understanding how these LLMs work and how they think and how do we evolve that thinking, and going through some psychedelic experience where they lose their ego to have a heightened level of enlightenment seems like a really interesting exercise. And you know the beauty of working with AI and is that you can run evals on it and measure outcomes and come up with some objective data sets to suggest whether or not it improved or not. So we will see.
Right. It's going to be good. All right. Well, that's all for today's rambling pod. Next
All
week,
right.
we'll come back and we'll talk about how I made GPT go on a trip and discuss the meaning of life. And then after that, I had to evaluate our go-to-market plan. Until next time, thank you to our 12 listeners. We'll see you next week.
All right. See ya.
Peace.